welcome to the inaugural episode of Fresh Juice, an indie game podcast. I am one of your hosts, Tommy Fresh, and I am joined by
Matty Juice. What's going on, everybody? Thanks for joining us in the inaugural episode of Fresh Juice. We appreciate it.
Yeah, no, we have a shared love of indie games, so we also have a shared bloodline. We are cousins, and we thought, hey, let's hop on the mics and talk about indie games and probably review them, go into some news, some listener questions, all that kind of fun stuff, which we'll all get to. But today we're going to talk about Cocoon, which is a brand new indie game. Just came out like less than 7 days ago. And we're going to tell you all of our thoughts, and we're going to talk about what we think about it, and maybe if it's good or bad, we don't know. We'll go into our rating system too when we get there. But before that, what's going on, Matt? What's new in your world?
Oh man, just been super busy lately. Just work, and I know trips coming up, things like that. Just been really busy, kind of getting all that stuff ready. On the gaming front, been playing a lot of. We'll get into the recommendations as well towards the end of the episode. So maybe I'll just save what I'm going to say right there for the recommendations later, because that's what I've been playing a lot of lately. But yeah, no, just excited to kick off the pod, finally talking about games, something I love to do, something we've loved to do for a while. We're finally kind of, doing it. So I'm just excited. What about you, man? What's been going on?
We're putting it on wax, is what they'd say. We've finally decided that, we had been doing a couple different podcasts over the years. You might know me from the Tommy John Show, or Fresh and Buds, which is this is an ongoing podcast I do currently, and might know Matt from Just Because, or Mistakes Were Made, or even Rare Occurrences on the Tommy John Show.
Yes.
So we finally made the connection to say, you know what, maybe this is the magical sauce that is the right combination for the biggest podcast in the world, and you can clip that, because you know what? In 5 years' time, people will be looking back. How did he know? But yeah. What's new with me? Busy as a bee right now. Fresh and Buds is very busy. I did a set review for a game called Flesh and Blood. I'll talk about that later. And it's very long, and it's a long editing process as well. But it is a lot of fun, as well as getting ready for a trip. This weekend. It should be a lot of fun. We both are going to Kentucky for a bachelor party, which should be fun to drink bourbon and hopefully make it back in one piece, which is
fried chicken,
and fried chicken. Who you, Brittany Mahomes? Besides that, it's just been kind of doing work stuff and not really gaming as much as I'd like to, but I got a little gaming in this weekend, which was fun. And Cocoon was a nice breath of fresh air to at least sit down and play some a new game, which is cool. But let's talk about some news in the indie game world. I think there's always something going on, and there's some kind of hype happening for some games or other stuff like that. But I was scouring the internet, and I found this one article about this game called Astrolander. Have you heard of this?
I have not. I did see you put that in the show notes, Doc, and I just, because it seems so interesting, I actually haven't read up on it at all. So definitely would love to hear kind of what this is all about.
Yeah, so I was like looking around. So I don't have a PS5 or anything like that, but I saw this article. There is this game called Astrolander, which is going to come out next year, 2024, that is going to be a PS5 exclusive, I believe. And the interesting thing about it is it's made by a solo developer that is a 13-year-old boy named Max Trest. So I got to imagine, I mean, if this kid is making something good enough for PS5, obviously we should keep our eyes on something like that. I read into what the game is. It's a co-op adventure looking to optimize the DualSense, which I'm guessing is some kind of technology in the controllers. Is that correct?
Yes. So the DualSense is it's like basically like a feature, I believe, of the PS5 controller. Something that makes the PS5 controller kind of unique compared to other controllers is it has kind of these adaptive triggers, I think they call it. So I don't know if this kid potentially could be using that, but essentially, certain things in certain games, it might be really hard to press on that trigger. It might kind of give you a little bit of trouble just kind of pushing it down all the way. Other ones, it could be a lot quicker. So they kind of have like different sensitivities essentially for the triggers. And I believe that's kind of part of the whole dual sense package, I guess, with those controllers. I think there's other features, but that's probably the most like well-known one, I would say, for the PS5 controllers. But yeah, I'm definitely curious to see if this kid is going to be using some of that sort of stuff because not a lot of developers use it, which is kind of surprising. I think maybe Resident Evil, when I played on PS5, it was using it. Maybe The Last of Us as well. But really, the other stuff I've used, I mean, God of War, or the other stuff I played, God of War kind of did it a little bit. So for a 13-year-old to potentially be doing that sort of stuff in their game, I'm hoping there's kind of a big payoff with it, and hopefully he uses it right. But yeah, it's just, I mean, game development is just so hard for like a solo developer to be 13 years old and working on a game for the PS5, which is not, there's so many indie developers, right, that try to get their games on these consoles. And for him to be able to do that is just impressive, regardless of how well the game is going to be or how good the game is going to be. Yeah, so just super impressive, I would say, just, kind of across the board with this. And I'm just looking at the screenshots right now, and I'm sure we'll include the link, in the description of the episode as well, so you guys can check it out. But it's a lot better looking than I thought it was going to be. Clicking open to this article, so pretty impressive. Yeah.
Yeah, it looked really interesting. Obviously, I don't have a PS5 currently, but that could obviously change down the road. And I'd always heard about the DualSense, and I never really like looked up on it. I just knew that it was like something that PS5 was doing or PlayStation was doing. I guess Sony is the company that owns them. And hearing that like it would actually like make it harder to pull the trigger or press a button or something like that. That sounds really interesting, and something like Astrolander, which looks like this kind of like land on a planet, kind of maybe run around and do some survival stuff. I'm not sure. It looks like you could probably use it a lot, and that's probably why Sony was like, "Hey, we'll help you develop this and throw it on as exclusive because we want to feature this DualSense." Because when I think of like unique controllers, I think of Nintendo, right? And Nintendo always features the games that use those controllers like to the maximum of their ability, right? So
Yeah.
kind of neat. So yeah, we'll throw that in the description as well. And it definitely sounded interesting. It definitely worth mentioning. Now, the next thing I saw was, and I had not heard of this game because I'm not a big Souls player, but I know you are. There's this game coming out called Anotria: The Last Song, and they released a technical trailer, and I had not heard about this game, so I just watched the technical trailer, and it just looked so cool. Like it's very like Italian puppet themed, like, but a little bit more like badass, I guess is the word that I would use for it. But what's your take on this game? Is this something that you're excited for?
Yeah, no, this is actually, and just, for the listeners, kind of some context. We go to PAX East every year, and honestly, the indie games are our favorite part of the show, always kind of checking these out. And this past year, I actually did play Notria: The Last Song at PAX. I reached out to the developers as well. Unfortunately, the demo that they had was not available for public use because I would love to have played more of it. So the little bit that I did play of it was pretty great. The thing with these Souls-like games is that it can't be just a carbon copy of what a Souls game is. You kind of have to build on some of those mechanics and get a little bit more kind of just of unique gameplay. And when I was playing Anotria, the little bit that I did play, it did feel like it kind of had a unique spin to it. I haven't played enough to really obviously know if it's going to last, if it it has longevity to it. But the little bit that I did play, It was interesting, and I do think this is also kind of riding a little bit on the coattails of like Lies of P, since that is also kind of an Italian Souls-like, right? And I think
Yeah.
Anotria is also, it's mechanic wise, it doesn't look like it's the same, but it has those similar kind of Souls-like elements. So I think there's a lot of potential here for Notria. It's just I think it's going to come down to like the marketing. There's a lot of great Souls-likes that come out that just don't get a lot of love. Um, and there's also a lot of Souls-likes that come out that don't really have any polish to it as well. So it's looking like, they're doing this technical showcase trailer. They're kind of taking their time building the game. I when I reached out about the demo from PAX, they said that was an alpha that they're currently not like releasing to the public, but they hope to have one later in the future. So it's a good sign that they're kind of taking their time with this game. So I'm just hoping that, come springtime, this is a well-polished Souls-like that kind of gets some good traction from its marketing. So, to me right now, it's looking pretty impressive. But I'm hoping it kind of pays off because a lot of these games, right, look impressive in the trailer. So hopefully, it releases well and it's received well.
Yeah, it's hard to say, right? Like, because you get some games at like PAX that like the lines are so long you can't even get to the game, and then it comes out and it's the Gollum game, and and nobody even wants to play it, which is kind of like interesting. But I'm hoping that like it coming out in spring. In spring could be anything. It could be like May, it could be even June, to be honest.
Yeah.
It will have enough space between itself and Lies of P that they won't really clash with each other, but also will be close enough to Lies of P that people are like, I just finished this game. I'm jonesing for another adventure in this same kind of world. And hopefully that could be kind of that for a lot of players. So it's interesting. Now, you threw something in here about the Humble Bundle. Humble Bundle, Indie
Yes.
Bundle. It's a lot of bundles.
It is. It's we're bundling the bundles here, but so I just saw a good amount of people talking about this a few days ago, so I just threw it in here. But for those of you who don't know, Humble Bundle, great website for picking up. I think it's mostly PC games that they have. But essentially, every time you purchase one of their bundles, it supports a certain charity, and then obviously supports Humble Bundle as well, so they can keep doing great stuff like this. So their bundles are also, I'm pretty sure they're always kind of pay your own price sort of bundle, but they do sort of have tiers. So if I believe this current indie bundle right now, which like I said, is getting a good amount of hype around it. It's got a Metroidvania in there. It's got a team-based dodgeball game in there. It's got a kind of a Souls-likey Metroidvania sort of game called Untitled in there. Action platformer, Void Bastards. I know that game had a lot of press around it when it came out. That's a kind of like a roguelike FPS, which is really interesting. So it's got some great games in there. I'm even seeing this game Ring of Pain, which I've never heard of before, but it says it's a card-based dungeon crawler. So that seems kind of interesting as well.
That's cool.
They sort of have these different tiers where I believe you could pay like $5, you get like 3 of the games. You pay $10, you get some more of the games. And then their max tier for this bundle is $14 or more you can pay. And you get 10 games out of that. So we're not sponsored by Humble Bundle or anything like that, but these seem like really strong indie games, even if they're not, talked about a lot, these specific ones. But I just saw this bundle kind of getting a good amount of hype, and Humble Bundles don't always hit, but this one seems like it's a pretty good one, and I'm likely going to pick it up at some point. So definitely check it out on the humblebundle.com website. .com website? Yeah, .com website.
A .com what website? It's huge. Now it does sound pretty neat. It's something I had never really done or really looked at, but it might be something that I'm going to look at, especially for that price. Obviously I'd love to kind of support a good cause as well, which is nice. And obviously we here at Fresh Juice love a good cause here and there. So not even here and there, everywhere. So as long as it's a good cause that we agree with, because if it's a good cause that we don't agree with, but
it's not a good cause.
It's not good enough. I'll tell you that much. But yeah, so that's gonna be the news for the week, which means, Matt, it's our first review ever for a game called Cocoon, which when we decided to do this podcast, we kind of scoured the internet to see what's some big releases that kind of give us like some time to get some stuff together to do the podcast and make sense with our timeline. And this one really jumped out at me and then you as well, I'm assuming, because it, first of all, looked really cool. And it had some hype already, which is obviously something that we want to like be hyped about too, and see if the hype makes sense. So we decided to go with Cocoon. Can you tell us basically what the game is for anybody? Like, what's the elevator pitch for this game?
Sure. So I think really the first thing kind of about the game is that it's created by the same people that made Limbo and Inside. So if you're fans of those games, this one is probably going to be a hit for you as well. So it's an adventure puzzle game. It kind of has a Monument Valley sort of art style. If you guys are familiar, I believe that's an iOS game. It sort of has that simple art style. And yeah, it's kind of a unique take on a puzzle adventure game where each world in the game exists within an orb that you carry on your back. So kind of think of like Inception in a way, but as a puzzle game. So I think like overall that probably wraps up what this game is about. I mean, we can dive obviously a little deeper into it, but essentially a puzzle game where you're going in and out of different orbs that you're carrying, which sounds really confusing. We'll probably have some gameplay up to show you guys if you're watching on YouTube. And yeah, it's honestly, I beat the game. You know, it just came out, and it's about a 4-hour game. And I beat it already, and it was great. Every single part of the game was fantastic to me. So definitely recommend it if you're a fan of Limbo and Inside, or even just generally puzzle games, adventure puzzle games in general. I think this is one of the best. We're not going to get into the ratings just yet, but we'll kind of dive a little bit into it right there.
Well, yeah, I mean, this was something that the concept really resonated with me, and I really enjoyed the art style and all that. But let's get into each category. I think we're going to kind of approach these reviews by 4 main kind of categories, or whatever you want to call them: gameplay, story, visuals, and then sound design / music, with an additional caveat, I think, on performance, right? On whatever you're playing it on, which I believe this is on all platforms. The Cocoon.
Yes.
So I'll start off with the gameplay. And just so you know, I played this on the Nintendo Switch. I have Game Pass, and I know it's free on Game Pass, but I needed to like get away from my computer and just sit down, hang out with my fiance, and just play a game on the couch. So I went with the Switch, and you know, I spent some money on it. So we will see if it was worth the money. Now, gameplay wise, initially, you know, I didn't really know a lot about what the game was going to be like. I knew it was some kind of platformer adventurer. I didn't know it was going to be a puzzle game necessarily right out the gates. So initially I was like, oh, you know, I was like, is it just one button? Right? And I was like, it is just one button. And I was like, it always takes that like hot second, right? When you're playing a game that doesn't have a jump, that you're just like, yeah, I need to get that through my head that I can't jump. And you can't really like fall off of platforms really either. Everything is very casual player focused and friendly, which is very nice. Now, the puzzle challengingness of it. Now, you mentioned the orbs, which, so each orb has like a kind of an ability, and it's like a world that you can go into, and you can switch orbs, and there's the puzzle part of it is you got to figure out which orb you need while you're in one of the other orbs, and I got to jump out of this orb and grab another one. It sounds very complicated, and in a way it will take you a hot second to really figure out like what you're supposed to do here, but it finds like a really, like, I think, unique way of presenting puzzles with these orbs. Now, you know what else I thought about these orbs? Because so like they are each a world, right? They are each a level in a way. Like when you hop into them, you have to place them on like a platform and then jump into like a pool. I was thinking this is the marbles from Men in Black. Which
I was thinking that too a little bit, to be honest. Yeah.
I was like, these are the Men in Black marbles. If you haven't seen Men in Black, sorry, spoiler alert. It's from the 90s. But
Orion's belt.
Yeah. So basically, this cat has a little marble on a cat named Orion had a marble on her collar, and it was like a universe or whatever. And basically at the end of the movie, somebody's playing marbles with the universes, which was probably a little bit over the top for the movie, but the movie was pretty fun. This was what it was reminding me of the whole time. I was like, I am playing the Men in Black 1 game in a way. So I kind of love that aspect. Love the challenge of the puzzles. I also love being the little bug guy. Or girl, whatever it is, it's very cool. Now, you know, you don't get to do a lot of buggy things. You're just a bug, but I gotta say, it's pretty hilarious the way you run around, like to watch, because your wings kind of like almost like not flow, but like kind of get blown back like a cape when you're running around, which is a really funny like visual. But I really enjoyed this gameplay. I thought it was very interesting. I thought it was unique. I didn't feel overly challenging, but I did feel challenged, which I think is a nice balance, right? You want a challenge in a puzzle game, but you don't want to feel like, I can't beat this. What are they even doing? And they give you a lot of visual hints too, which is nice. Like not even like totally blatantly like hinting at something, but it will give you kind of an idea of what you're supposed to be doing, which is kind of cool.
Yeah.
Also, I want to shout out to the third level, the purple level. So each orb has a color. And they usually kind of, I guess, coincide with what the level is. So like the first level you start out was like a red, and it is like a desert level, like a desert mountain level, and then so on and so forth. The purple one, and I'm not spoiling anything here, but it is very gross, that level. And like
it is.
And like the sounds that come from that level, it's just like, and I gotta say, I wrote down one note here. It's in my notebook. That was the Cocoon level, and it was disturbing. But it did make me laugh, which I appreciate that, because like it was a little bit silly, but also a lot of fun. So I enjoyed the gameplay quite a bit. It was very rewarding, at least from my perspective. What about you, Matty?
Yeah, no, I definitely agree with everything that you had said there. I'm just looking at my notebook as well, but I thought it was just the animations were really satisfying. Going in and out of worlds in the orbs, it was just seamless, right? There's not a loading screen. You're just kind of in and out like easily. I just found that to be like super satisfying, and just everything was just really so smooth as well. Like when it came to solving the puzzles, like I didn't come across any bugs or any even just like FPS drops. I did play on PC. I played on Game Pass, and it worked flawlessly. Also, just as a note, this game is not a $60 game. It's a $25 game. So, don't think you're paying $60 for 4 hours of gameplay. It's definitely not the case here. But yeah, I just, in terms of like the difficulty, I did find it a little bit on the easier side, actually, until the end of the game, where it's maybe the last like 30 minutes or so. You really had to kind of nest orbs within other orbs to then solve a puzzle, and then you had to unnest everything, and it just kind of got a little complicated, where I had to sit back and really just think about like the order that these things need to happen in order to progress. But the game does a great job of kind of leading you on, like you were mentioning. There's certain parts where Once you pick up an orb from a certain area, that area then closes, so that okay, I don't need to go back there. I don't need to try to solve another puzzle that opens up that door. It kind of just pushes you along in the right direction. And I know you also did mention, is there no jump in the game, right? And there is no jump. It's basically a one button game. But for me, I kept trying to sprint. I kept trying to see if there was a way to sprint. I kept, hitting the right bumper and holding B and all this sort of stuff, clicking in the joystick, and there was no sprint. But your character does move pretty fast, so I didn't really need to. It was just kind of out of habit. So yeah, overall, I just thought the gameplay was really satisfying. The bosses as well, I thought each one kind of had unique mechanics that were, you're really just kind of jumping around, dodging the boss. You're not, you might be shooting every now and then. I believe maybe one of the later bosses you have to. But so it's not like super complicated boss fights or anything, but each one did have their own mechanics, which I thought was really interesting. And I found it to be pretty entertaining. I wasn't bored during the boss fights or anything like that. Some of the puzzles, they're just so easy that you're like, all right, I know I need to run over here and do this. But that was kind of just more about the early game. And then I think like the last thing here I have about the gameplay that I found really satisfying is that throughout the game, you're using kind of this ball that's sort of attached to the world, and you kind of use it as a joystick to move around like a creature that's in the world. And I just thought that was really, really interesting and pretty cool. I didn't realize that was even a mechanic that I would like. But once I kind of realized that it was like a joystick and that I'm kind of using a joystick to then control a joystick in the game, I just thought that was really interesting and not necessarily something they needed to do, but definitely something that I think paid off for them and just in terms of like entertainment. So yeah, just overall though, I thought the gameplay was fantastic, and I'm actually hoping that they come out with some sort of DLC or something like that. I don't know if they've ever done that for Limbo or Inside, but I think that this game has the potential to have some additional content, since it is a puzzle game. They can come up with new puzzles, new orbs, things like that, new abilities. So yeah, overall, great gameplay. Really satisfied with it.
Yeah, and I forgot to mention the boss levels as well. It was kind of cool. They almost felt like toned down bullet hell bosses.
Yeah,
like Enter the Gungeon or something like that, where it presented itself as like a puzzle for you to figure out, right? Like it wasn't inherently clear how you're supposed to kill these bosses, and you have to figure out why, which is kind of neat. It kind of felt like Legend of Zelda, like the old top-down Legend of Zeldas.
Definitely,
to be honest, and yeah, they were a lot of fun. Now, I'll move on to story here. So this one should be relatively short because, well, there's no real story. I mean, I shouldn't say that. There is no inherent story that is just presented to you. There is some visual storytelling here. The game starts. You're this bug guy. You come out of a Kokusi and you just start doing your thing and you just figure it out. You're thrown to the wolves, and
Yep.
and there's I did not beat the game. I didn't have time, but I put a decent amount of hours into it. So I didn't get to the end. I don't know if there's something, you can obviously talk about this, if there's something that's like, hey, you did something. But to me, the story was, I don't want to say lacking, because it is just a very simple game, but it felt like you didn't know, I didn't realize, or not even realize, I didn't even know why I was messing around with these Men in Black marbles, right? Like I was just like, oh, I'm just solving puzzles, which is not a bad thing whatsoever. But if you're looking for story, this to me is not a game for you, right? Like there's no real reason why all this is happening other than you were birthed into this world and you gotta get out of it or figure out what to do with these marbles, and that's basically where that's all my notes on the story. There was nothing. It was just, to me, there was not a lot going on story wise.
Yeah, totally agree. For like a game like this, I felt like Limbo. I never really played Inside, but Limbo kind of had. I felt like a story. Like you could kind of pick up a story from Limbo, I guess you could say. But this game is just so focused on the puzzles that yeah, there just wasn't really, I guess, room for a story. But I would have liked, maybe a little bit of maybe some characters you run across that like give you a hint or something like that, like anything like that that kind of gives a little bit more life into the world. You're really the only, I guess, quote unquote, living thing in the world. Everything else kind of seems like mechanical or just kind of like a weird alien sort of boss creature. I will say though, without spoiling anything, that at the end of the game there is something that makes you think, oh, uh, there could be more to this.
Okay.
So that is um, pretty much all I'll say about it because I don't know if you're gonna end up finishing it or you want to, and obviously I don't want to spoil it for the listeners, but yeah, there really isn't like a story with the game. I was trying to think if there was anything that kind of hinted towards a specific story, but yeah, you don't really know why you're doing any of this. It's just kind of here's a puzzle game, beat it sort of thing. So yeah, definitely a lower score on the story, but again, I don't know if the game really set out to try to have a story in the first place. So, yeah, definitely not a game if you're looking for a story.
Yeah, yeah, and I do plan on finishing it. I don't think I'm that far from the end, to be honest. Just didn't have time before we started the podcast, so it is something that now that you say that, I'm definitely more inclined to do so. And my fiance really enjoyed watching me do it. So like whatever, maybe after this I'll just hop on the couch and we'll play.
Yeah,
But yeah, no, but I like what you said. Like, what if like there were other characters? Even like I don't even need them to give you hints. It would be kind of cool to run into some other bug guys or something like that. Or be like, just say something flavor wise, like in like terms of the
yeah,
lore. Like, what's this like planet called or whatever? What are these orbs? But there wasn't a lot of that, so it was lacking there. But it was it could have used it, but I don't think it necessarily needed it. But moving on to something that I think is maybe one of the best things about the game is the visuals. Uh,
yeah,
the style, like you said, is almost like Monument Valley
yep,
esque, but it felt like it blended a lot of styles visually, and there were so many unique things that felt alien yet familiar, if that makes sense. That they designed in the visuals here. I already mentioned that the way the protagonist bug guy is running around seems like it was funny. It was like it was dynamic to watch. Everything that you interact with is dynamic in a way, which is really cool. You mentioned the little joystick, like gross things that you pull to the side.
yeah,
There in each level there's a key that you have to get through the final parts of the level, and when you get the key it's just like a little floating little drone thing that follows you, and even that felt like it had personality, which was really really nice. And I found that the difference in the orb levels was very distinct. It felt like each one had its own personality and its own challenges. I also like the representation of each. So when you're carrying each orb, you also get an ability that helps you finish a puzzle or finish a level, and the way they portray that felt right. So like the red one, like it would help you get across something, right? And it felt like it made sense. It just did the way it looked, and same with the green one, and then the purple one, and so on
yeah,
and so forth. So I really like that everything kind of came together and made sense visually, right? I don't really have any real qualms. There are maybe like a few points where I was like, okay, is this part of the level or not? And you just have to walk to it. And if you can't get past it, it's not. But
yeah,
it is a puzzle game, so it's worth checking out every nook and cranny anyway. So that's just a nitpick, to be honest. And I really like visually was like really a huge fan of this game. It was just it was this and the sound design, which we'll get to, this and the sound design was like a home run for me, and just really just made it feel like a calm experience. It didn't feel like these puzzles were going to be frustrating ever, and I think they could have easily have been if you weren't like in such like a nice looking and sounding place, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Oh, definitely. Yeah. And I'm sure that was intentional. They wanted to make sure the visuals were calming so that people didn't freak out about the puzzles. But yeah, no, I totally agree. I think, the game, it just reminds me so much of like Monument Valley and that kind of art style. But it also sort of did a great job of like combining like organic sort of visuals with like mechanical sort of visuals together, which I thought was really interesting. And, talking about like the orb abilities, I could like picking up that red orb and like walking across those bridges. Like sometimes I would just stand there and just watch like all the particles that kind of like fly around you as you're walking across the bridge. It was just so like inviting. Like I just wanted to keep kind of finding those bridges everywhere. And then even with like the green, right? It's basically green, right?
Yeah,
The green orb. Yeah. That's helping you kind of go up, and it kind of brings that verticality to the puzzles, which is really interesting. And that was really satisfying to do as well. And yeah, as far as like the visuals when it comes to like kind of the environment design, at first, I'll be honest, like I was a little stumped. I didn't realize that like the character itself. So just for the listeners to know, like when you're carrying an orb, you can't walk through certain things. There's kind of these like little kind of spikes sticking out of the ground that you can't walk through. But if you drop the orb, you can walk right through them. So I didn't really realize that at first, just because like typically when it comes to games, if there's like an area or a walkway that's kind of looks like it's blocked off, you can't get past it. So once I realized that, it kind of opened up the gates, right? Of just like, oh, okay, so I need to keep looking out for this and keep looking out for other things that my character might be able to fit through, but the orb can't fit through. So yeah, I think overall, it has that kind of abstract art style to it. Even like towards like the end of the game, you start to like see things that are more like geometric shapes that don't look like it belongs in the world that you have to deal with. So that was really interesting. Just kind of something different towards the end of the game, and you're not just doing the same stuff over and over again. But yeah, I think overall, like the art style, it was a home run in my book as well. It just, I would love to see kind of more games in this art style, specifically like puzzle games, but even like other genres, like going into this art style, a dungeon crawler in this art style could be really cool. Yeah, I think overall they did a great job with it.
Yeah, it was really neat, and it just it shows how well thought out it was too, and how the visuals kind of tied in with how the puzzles worked. Now, I alluded to the sound design. I really liked it. So the music, right, was not like super I guess complex. It was very ambient, and
Yep.
it was kind of like welcoming. It never felt, there were times when it would, depending on the level, it would move into almost a horror vibe, but still very ambient. But the sound design itself for all the sound effects, I thought was the real like bread and butter of this game, because everything sounded the way you would expect, right? If I don't know if this makes sense, but like everything that you interacted with and it made a sound, it made sense without you even realizing, because obviously a lot of this stuff like looked foreign and alien and whatever. And I think that's like, it's subtle. It's not something that's like everybody's like, we got to make sure this happens in a video game.
Yeah.
But I liked it, right? Like this is something that like I enjoy, because like you don't want it to feel, because that could easily take you out of the game, and I didn't feel like any of the sound design did. Even like, depending on the level, you would have this, like you have ambient music, but you'd also have like an ambient background noise as well. Like I think the green level, it was raining the whole time, but it didn't. It felt like it belonged, because you're kind of in like a swampy area. So I thought that was very cool, very interesting, and maybe I would have liked for some more complexity in the actual music itself, but the ambient vibe did make sense for the relaxing nature of the game, I think. So, I really enjoyed it, the sound design here, and honestly, it kind of goes hand in hand with the visual aspect in terms of like they really thought out how all of this will tie into your experience solving these puzzles, which is pretty neat. And even when you unlock the key, it doesn't matter, at least for the first couple ones, it doesn't matter what, because you had to like hit these special little nodes or whatever to try to unlock the key. And there's always a certain order that you have to do it. They're all different shapes. And, but that being said, they all each had a tone, it was a scale, right, of music. And
Yep.
I thought that because initially when you're going through it, it's like, oh, I have to do it in order, and then you realize, no, not this time, maybe a different time. You don't, and you look for visual cues. So it was all very nice.
Yeah.
I liked it.
Yeah, definitely agree. I actually have written down here the eerie music, so that kind of creepy horror-esque music. Really, that was like kind of the first time I noticed like the ambient sounds, and I was a little creeped out. I was like, I don't know what's going to happen here. So I thought that was really well done. That's probably when it comes to ambient music, I would say like the eerie and creepy music was probably the best in my opinion. But then also just looking at like the sound effects, like I wrote down here, like the orb blast sound effect. So just like picking up the orbs and putting them down, just it was like so satisfying. And you made a great point of just like this is exactly what you would want it to sound like, you expect it to sound like. But just sometimes picking up the orbs or switching your orbs with another one, and just hearing that little kind of glass orb sound was just super satisfying overall. And then I also really liked the sound of his feet walking around, kind of like a little pitter patter, especially when kind of the ambient music was pretty quiet and you were just kind of pitter pattering, around trying to solve things. I just thought that was also really calming. And yeah, also just in terms of like the key that you can get, it's this sort of little. He reminds me of like if you guys have ever played Destiny, like a ghost is kind of like your little companion that floats next to you. That's kind of what he is. And then yeah, he opens up these kind of nodes, and that was really satisfying. Like just seeing him open up the nodes, but then hearing the sound, he kind of like blinks a little bit, and like it's like and then it's just satisfying. You're like, oh. It reminded me of like Zelda, where like you find, you solve a puzzle, so it gives you a little sound, right? So like this is kind of a similar thing here. But yeah, I think overall the sound design was great. I think I would have liked a little bit more uh, when you actually put the key, that little guy, floating guy, back into like that sort of, you put it in, I don't know, some sort of structure,
Yeah.
and then it opens up another door. You're kind of returning him back to where he went. I kind of thought the sound would be a little different there for some reason. I thought it would be like, I don't know, squishy sounding based on like what it looked like or
Yeah.
something like that. But that was really the only thing that I was like, oh, that wasn't exactly what I was expecting, but everything else was. Yeah, I think overall, like the music was great, and the music is definitely something I also, and the sound effects are something I remember from Limbo a lot, being really, because there's not a lot of visuals there, right? It's basically just black, like you're looking at like silhouettes of characters, so there's not too much they can do in terms of visuals, but the audio in Limbo kind of reminded me of the audio in this game, where like it's exactly what you sort of expect it to be. So yeah, no, I think overall, they did a great job with the audio design. I'm not sure if because I know the lead gameplay designer of Limbo and Inside made this game, so I'm not sure if he's how involved he is with the audio. I imagine he has a say in it, but I'm not sure if he's the one that's actually kind of putting these scores together and things like that. But great job though, regardless, whoever did it. I thought overall it was really great.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And you mentioned that you had no performance issues on Game Pass.
Correct. Yeah. Now I did just upgrade my PC though, so this is
Okay.
like I'm probably running like soft or hardware that's like on the higher end. But
Mhm.
if it is a very kind of low I guess not a game that requires a ton of optimization, I would imagine, but definitely curious to see what the Switch experience was like.
The Switch was good mostly. Like this, the Switch usually has. It did have some drop frames. We are dealing with a pretty old system at this point. Love the Switch, but sometimes it just can't handle some things when everything's going on within the world, right? Like that's when I would notice issues. I would even notice issues like on Animal Crossing, like if the wind was blowing and like everything was blowing at the same time, like I would lose frames, right? So but other than that, it wasn't like anything that took me out of the game or anything like that. But it sounds like we both liked it, but how much did we like it? We're going to talk about our ratings here. So fresh juice, obviously you always want fresh juice at the grocery store. So we're going with grocery store themed ratings. So basically, to kind of put this out there, the worst tier you can have is spoiled milk, right? That's like the opposite of fresh juice, almost. I guess you could say spoiled juice, but we're saying spoiled milk. That's the worst thing you can get at the grocery store. A little bit above that. So like those are like the really bad games, like games that we would not want you to ever really get. Ever.
Games that we didn't even want to play.
We didn't even play. We did play, but we didn't want to. We wish we didn't. Yeah. The next tier above that is the manager special. So the manager special typically is like when something's getting close to spoiled, the grocery store will put it on special. They'll say manager special. It'd be like, wow, what a steal, but it's not the best product. So these are the games where, okay, maybe if you got it for free, or whatever, and you had some extra time, you wanted to try it out, go for it. But we are not in no way recommending that this is what you should be, doing. Above that is like get on sale. So, Steam has a lot of summer sales. All these platforms have sales in one way or another. We just talked about the Humble Bundle. Jesus Christ. In the news segment there, get on sale. So like, oh, maybe this game is good, but like probably not worth the price, right? So, get it on sale. Yeah, that's basically what we're saying. And then above that is it's a steal. It's properly priced. You're going to have a good time. It's a good game. It is good, but it's not great because that is for the tier of certified fresh juice. These are these are the best games that you can play. These are like you can't miss them, right? So this is a game like a game of the year contender. I would say is probably where you're going to see a lot of the certified fresh juice ratings for these games. So without further ado, Matt, Mr. Juice, what is your rating for Cocoon?
All right, so I wrote this down so that I would not change it throughout the podcast, based on like anyone else's opinions and all that. So I gave it certified fresh juice.
Whoa!
Because I love this game. Like I just kept becoming surprised by it. The only caveat with the game is that it's only 4 hours, but it is $25. But I would have liked it to be a little bit longer. Probably that's why I'm hoping for some expansions or DLC down the road. But for me, certified fresh juice. I do think this will be in the nominees for Game of the Year for the Game Awards. I don't think it's going to win, just because it's just the nature of the game, and I just don't think I think we got some heavy hitters that are coming that have already happened as well. But I think that it will be in the conversation. So for me, I give it an S tier. I'm starting out strong here.
Whoa!
With some certified fresh juice. We'll see. I can't imagine that that's going to happen very often with some of the games we have lined up. But for me, this was a certified fresh juice.
Yeah, all right. Well, this is interesting because I really love this game. Right? Like I really, really enjoyed it, and I plan on playing it after we're done recording tonight. I don't know if it's a certified fresh juice for me. I have it down as a steal. I think this is a very good game. I don't think it's the greatest game. I don't think it's a great game. And I'm not trying to discount it. I just had a few nitpicks here and there. Maybe
discount it. Sorry.
Oh, there you go. No, yeah, we're not discounting because it doesn't need to be. It's a steal at the price. I really enjoyed it. It's, it takes a lot for, a game to really grab me. Shout out Bags. Loves when games grab him. That's an inside joke from Mistakes Were Made. Now, the reason I'm not giving a certified fresh juice, I think mostly is I found myself wanting just a little bit more complexity. I think that's basically where it came down to. It felt very simple, and that's okay if that's the goal that they went for. But for me personally, if it was just a little bit more complex, but not too, like it's really such a fine line. Everything else, the visuals, the sound, maybe some more lore or some more flavor thrown in there for like some like resemblance of a story would have really brought it up there. I'm with you in thinking that it might be nominated because it is a very beautiful game. It's very well thought out. They really did a great job with it. But there's just a few things that I would have liked more. But no, by no means a bad game. It is a steal. I would 100% recommend it. So that's go for it.
Oh, no, I was just also going to say, I was kind of going between the S tier, right, certified fresh juice, and the A tier of a steal until I kind of got to the end game.
Okay.
And then when things started to get maybe a little bit, it wasn't like overly complicated, but it definitely was the harder puzzles of the whole game, I would say. That's when I was like, okay, they're showing that they can do this. I would have liked to see it more. But yeah, just for me, I just thought that like this game is just such a well packaged game, if that makes sense, right? It's just like they set out to do this specific thing and they did it really, really well. So yeah, I think I was kind of going in between, like I said. So maybe, who knows? Maybe if you finish it later tonight, we could have a score update for the next pod. Who knows? But I think like A is definitely like super fair for a game like this. Like it's definitely a steal, and especially since it's on Game Pass, right? It's just like if you have Game Pass,
it's a no-brainer.
Play it. Like just download it and play it, and play it for 30 minutes, and I'm sure you'll be hooked.
Yeah.
So.
I mean, you're very right. I could play the rest of this game, possibly tonight and next week. If you tune in, I might have an update on the score. I just might. Yeah. I just might. I tried to finish it, but I had some other stuff going on, and I'll finish it tonight. I'm gonna relax. I'm gonna play this game, and hopefully it's not too hard. No.
Yeah. And to be fair, right? Like typically, when you play a game like this, you're not waiting for the end to be like won over, right?
Yeah.
Like you kind of already know how you feel, so it might not happen. But I would love to kind of see what happens, after you finish.
Yeah, no, absolutely, and we'll find out. We will find out. It's a game I definitely plan on finishing. I'm pretty close, I believe. Now, this comes to a point in the game, or not the game, the podcast where we answer some listener questions. This is the first show, but we pulled some friends of ours to throw in some listener questions. If you want to submit a listener question, you can comment it under the video. You can tweet it at us on Twitter at FreshJuicePod. You can also email us if you'd really like, freshjuicepod@gmail.com. The first question here comes from Bags, who we just mentioned, who really loves when games grab him. What's the indie game that you all return back to the most?
Well, you want to kick this one off?
Sure. I'll kick it off.
Go for it.
So this is a tough question to answer. It depends on the mood. Right now, it's Slay the Spire. Right, I'm playing a lot of Slay the Spire on because it's on mobile now, and I'm trying to like beat all these different things. But I guess I'm not really returning to it. I'm like in progress playing it. The indie game that I return to the most usually tends to be a game I can play couch, like party games. So two that come to mind. One is a game called Crawl from, gosh, probably like 8 years ago at this point. It is a really unique game, dungeon crawler, 4-player. One person becomes the human, the other 3 people control the dungeon and the monsters, and you have to try to, like, whoever gets to the end and wins the game, or if the other 3 players manage to stop the one player from beating the boss, those players win. So it's a very fun, unique game that I love playing with like a group of friends. And another one is Boomerang Foo, which is just it's so much fun. I wish people talked about that game more. That game's insane. Like how much fun that is, especially when you can play like up to like 6, maybe 8 players. I mean, when it gets to that much, it's a little insane, but it's a ton of fun. It's just like a great party game with like some silly animations and stupid mechanics, but it's still a lot of fun. But those are the games I've been, if off the top of my head, I would say I revisit the most.
Awesome. Yeah, no, those are, I mean, I love playing Boomerang Foo, specifically in Crawl. I know we've played a good amount of. And yeah, Boomerang Foo, I just love it because it gets so hectic, but it's also like not easy. It's like not an easy game. You always have to be paying attention, you know?
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, really great game. For me, what indie game do I go back to the most? I haven't been playing it lately, but it's probably Valheim. I have played a ton of Valheim ever since it came out, and they there's only 5 or 6 developers, I believe, for that game. So it takes them a little bit to come out with like an expansion, but every time they do, I at least hop in for a day or two, and I just check out some of the new stuff. So Valheim is definitely towards the top of my list. And for the listeners, I'm a huge survival game fan. So I've played a ton of different survival games, a lot of bad ones. But Valheim is definitely one of the better indie survival games that I've played. And then the other one on my list that I do pop in time to time, especially on my phone, is Vampire Survivors. So I know that game has had a lot of hype around it. I played it on PC. I know a few of our buddies, including Bags, who submitted the question, loves that game. But that game is just a ton of fun. Across the board, it's kind of, if you don't know what it is, I believe it's on Game Pass as well. But it is, I think it's maybe $1 on Steam, something like that. But essentially, you're playing as a certain hero, and then you kind of have waves of enemies that sort of come at you. It's a top down. Maybe like similar like Geometry Wars, maybe if you've ever played that.
Yeah.
I don't really know how else to describe it, but it's a really awesome game. Definitely look up some gameplay. It looks very retro and old school, but it is a ton of fun, and it is a huge time waster. You can kill a lot of time playing that game. So probably I'm going with the V games, Vampire Survivors and Valheim, but those are probably the two that I go back to the most right now. There is a game that I've been playing a lot of that is an indie game, but we'll wait until the recommendations to get into that.
All right. Next question comes from Rhiannon, just like the Fleetwood Mac song, who also happens to live with me and plans on marrying me. What makes an indie game special compared to AAA games? I can start this one as well. This one's pretty easy for me. The love, as kind of like cheesy as that sounds, I think that the love really is really present in these games, and I think Cocoon's a great example of it. Like the time and the energy that's spent into making these games, usually on a small team. There's a lot of it riding financially or whatever on the game, and emotionally. And I think that's pretty important compared to a AAA game, because if a AAA game fails, they just move on to the next one, right? Yep. I think a great example, and I don't even know if you consider this an indie game. You can obviously correct me, but a great example of like when an indie game failed, but they were so tied to it for so long is what's the space game? Ah, jeez, I just had it in my head.
No Man's Sky.
No Man's Sky. Is that an indie? Did you
Yes.
say indie game?
Um,
Kind
well,
of.
technically it's an indie studio, but
Mm.
they're backed by Sony, so it's just
Okay.
like
Okay.
yeah.
All right.
Uh,
Well, but like, I feel like that game failed initially. Um, and if it was a true AAA studio, I feel like they would have said, whatever, we'll just move on to the next one, right? And they didn't, and now it's like probably one of the better games out there for people to play if you're into that kind of stuff. So it's stuff like that. I really enjoy that. And that's why it's so easy to talk about it, on a podcast.
Yeah, no, definitely agree. I think No Man's Sky is a great example of just like something didn't work out. Let's put our heads down, come out with like 20 free updates, and a few years later, it's had a complete redemption arc. So yeah, I think, to answer the question, like what makes an indie game special compared to AAA games, like you mentioned, the care, the love that goes into it. Not that, AAA studios and the people working on those don't really put the love in, but they have executives they need to answer to, and sometimes microtransactions become part of that conversation and kind of water down what the game should have been. But I think really like what draws me to indie games specifically is they take a lot of chances. There's so many indie games that fail. Whether it's taking a chance on the entire concept of the game, certain mechanics of a game, like I mentioned with Cocoon, kind of that joystick feature of like you pulling on that ball and being able to control a character in the game. I've never done anything like that in a video game before. Especially even just like going through the orbs is just another really cool mechanic. So I just love that they take chances on that. Now, of course, they're putting in the love and care so that those they have minimum or minimal kind of failure rate with those chances. They're making sure that it's fun to play. It's engaging, things like that. And then I think, a lot of, indie games are unique. I think also just talking to the devs at PAX, not that the conversations we have with AAA studios at PAX aren't good conversations, but you can really, when you walk up to a booth at PAX and it's one guy that built this game and you just talk to him about it for 5 minutes, like you can really hear the passion, and he's trying to show you, or he or she's trying to show you everything about the game. They're pointing out things that maybe you wouldn't have even noticed if you were playing the game, but they want to point it out because they know they put the care and the effort into a specific graphic or a specific mechanic, whatever it might be. So I think just talking to them and really hearing about all the care that they put into the game is just always kind of wins me over. Even if the game ends up not being good,
Yeah.
I still appreciate kind of them taking risks, right, and taking chances. I always think of Project Warlock, which I
Oh yeah.
believe did come out, but I believe that was made by one person, right, like a kid, maybe like a I don't know 20-year-old kid or something like that, where it's essentially think of Doom. The old school Dooms, but it's kind of mixed with you're a wizard, right?
Yeah. Yeah. You can shoot
So
guns or your staff or something like that.
yeah,
Yeah.
like what a neat idea, and that's something that like that would never get made. It's not like Ubisoft is trying to come out with a game that's like that. Like that's something that only an indie dev could do. And not to talk about this too much, but this also kind of reminds me of movies. I think this is a great question because I don't know, growing up, right, we would have all these different movies come out that were really weird. Maybe it was like like an Adam Sandler comedy movie, or like I don't know, we were I forget what we were just watching, but maybe The Longest Yard I was just watching. I know that's a remake of an older movie, but I heard Matt Damon say something that I thought makes a lot of sense, where movies back then, since before streaming, they had a second revenue stream of DVDs, right? So they could take chances on a movie kind of not doing well at the box office because they knew that second revenue stream of DVDs was going to come through. Well, now that doesn't really exist, right? It's just streaming, and if a movie doesn't do well in the box office, like chances are they're not going to make another one of those movies. And that's why we have a huge kind of output of Marvel and superhero movies and things like that that they know are going to sell. And I hope that just never happens to games, right? Like I hope there's always kind of an indie side of video games, because that's where we get the really unique mechanics. That's where I think a lot of the innovation comes from is with these kind of smaller indie devs. Long-winded answer, but I think it just comes down to the care and the love that they have for their games that kind of makes them more unique. But yeah.
Well, the indie spirit wouldn't have or if it didn't exist, we wouldn't have gotten one of our favorite movies, Office Space, which is very much a what would be qualified as an indie movie. And my God, that movie is amazing. Just a pre to the Rec Room. If you want to see a movie that's really funny, watch that. It's still somehow relevant from 1999. And the last question comes from Maria, who I believe is married to you.
For now. Yeah.
For now. Who is your favorite main character from an indie game? I can let you take this one first, since your betrothed asked.
Yeah. So this is a tough one. A main character from an indie game, just because I feel like a lot of the indie games I play don't like really give a name to the main character, right? Like Cocoon, for example, we don't know who it is. No Man's Sky, like it's just whatever character I kind of create. I would probably say, oh man, this is a tough one. I can't even think of like indie games with main characters. Rattle off some indie games. Maybe it'll. Well,
I can talk about mine, and you can think about yours ahead for a hot second. Mine is a no-brainer. It's the Beheaded from Dead Cells. Dead Cells just at this point just maybe one of the best indie games. Best indie Metroidvania of all time, and just such a unique character design. Still has like personality and is very fun to play as. I haven't played it in a while since like a lot of the DLC, but I don't think they ever really gave you a second character to play as, at least to my knowledge. But like I don't think you never needed it because. He's just so cool, and I really like the Beheaded. The character design's excellent, just like that kind of floating, like flame head. It's really neat. It's kind of like this, feels like an assassin that like kind of has this almost Sleepy Hollow vibe. It's very cool. I love the Beheaded.
Yeah, that's a great one. Honestly, Dead Cells is a game I probably need to pick up again and play some more of. It's always a blast playing that game. Yeah, I think I did do a little Googling just to kind of jog my memory, but I can't believe I forgot about this game, Cuphead.
Oh,
Cuphead is probably my favorite main character as of right now. It was actually between that and Super Meat Boy. I used to play Super Meat Boy a ton back in the day, and I just found that game was just so entertaining. But Cuphead is just so unique with the art style. They have a Netflix show about it now, so I guess he's got more lore about him. I haven't watched the show. Cuphead would probably be my favorite main character for an indie game right now. But we'll see if that changes in the future.
Yeah. No, that's a great answer. I forgot about Cuphead too, to be honest. But this brings us to our last little segment before we say goodbye. The Rec Room. This is where we recommend something. This could be anything. This could be a game. This could be a movie, a TV show, food, anything. But you said you had one, locked and loaded, Matt. So if you wanna hit us with it, fire away.
I do, yes. So I actually have, I know it's supposed to be one, but I have two games and a movie.
Okay.
Because I couldn't decide between them. But Lies of P is the game. I know I mentioned it earlier, but I have been playing this game pretty, quite a bit since it released a few weeks ago. And if you're into Souls-likes, this is a fantastic Souls-like. It is probably the most polished Souls-like that I have played. And for those who don't know what a Souls-like is, essentially, if you're a fan of Dark Souls or Elden Ring, which most people are probably familiar with at this point, it's a game that borrows mechanics from a Souls game, but also kind of builds on it and gives kind of a unique twist to it, similar to what we mentioned before with like Anotria, the last song. hopefully that game also has some unique mechanics to it. But Lies of P not only introduces new mechanics to the game, but it has a pretty interesting story as well because you're playing as Pinocchio. So it's kind of this twisted world that you're in. You've got Geppetto, who's kind of guiding you, which, I still don't trust him, but we'll see what happens. Yeah, it's a really well thought out game. It's super polished. I've seen really no one complain about the optimization of the game if you're playing on PC, which is great to hear, because there's usually a lot of issues with Souls games in general. But yeah, I would say Lies of P is probably my number one recommendation if you are into Souls-like games. My second game recommendation is if you have a Switch with an online subscription, I think you need to play F-Zero 99. I don't know if anyone's played it, but it is. I've played maybe an hour or two of it so far, but it is a ton of fun. It's a super simple racing game like old school F-Zero, but you're going up against 98 other people, or I guess maybe 99 other people, and it's just really entertaining. It's super simple. You can hop in and hop out whenever you want to. Very similar like Tetris 99, or I know they did like a Mario version of that too, I think. But I think F-Zero is kind of the best sort of battle royale style game from Nintendo that we've had since Tetris 99. Tetris 99 obviously shook up the entire gaming world, right? It was just like, what is this? And I think F-Zero, it's not quite at the level of Tetris 99 because Tetris is Tetris, but this is still a lot of fun. The only thing I wish it had was co-op. Like, I wish I could just partner up with Maria and we could play some F-Zero 99. But, is what it is. And then, sorry, the last recommendation I have here, and this is a movie that my wife and I just watched, Casper, the Friendly Ghost.
Casper, the Friendly
from
Ghost?
From the 90s. I forgot how great of a movie that is.
It's a good one.
I highly recommend hopping back and watching some Casper, especially since it's October now. We're getting closer to Halloween. But yeah, it is a fantastic movie, and I just kind of forgot how good it was, since it came out in like the mid 90s. But yeah, those are my three recommendations.
I like them. You spoiling us with these recommendations. I have a board game that I want to recommend. It's called Moonrakers. This is a game that I initially played at PAX Unplugged in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. And it is, if you've ever played like a deck builder like Ascension or Dominion or something like that, it is that, but it adds in the what do you call it? The negotiation that you get in stuff like Settlers of Catan or something like that. So you are each a player that is trying to complete these contracts. The contracts are hard to beat sometimes by yourself, so you have to like negotiate with other players. Like, listen, my deck can get half of this contract done. If your deck can help complete the contract, I'll give you some of the money we get from it. I'll give you some of the victory points. We'll divvy up the rewards. And also, whenever you like try to complete these contracts, you have to roll hazard dice. And basically, if you get dealt damage from these hazard dice, you lose victory points. So you can also say, hey, listen, I'll give you like a lot if you want to take the hazard dice for me. Like if you think you can block them or whatever. So it adds like a really interesting layer to the traditional kind of deck builder board game. But I have another recommendation, but I'll do it in the plugs. But yeah, I didn't even mention, we talked about it before the start of the show. We don't know what to call our listeners / viewers. I was thinking juice heads or juicers or something like that. But I think if you made it this far and you enjoyed the podcast and you want to be a juice head or a juicer, or if you want to come up with a better name for the viewers / listeners of this podcast, throw it in the comments. Let us know. And maybe we'll talk about next week, which I forget what the game is next week. It's like a party game. The possum, pizza possum.
Oh, pizza possum.
Pizza possum.
I think. Yeah.
This one might not be a Cocoon level game, but if it's shit, we're gonna tell you. So hey, listen, Tune in next week. You can continue to find me at FreshBudsPod on Twitter. Thanks for listening to us here at Fresh Juice, podcast about indie games. Support us on our socials. It's basically at Fresh Juice Pod across all socials on Twitter, YouTube, TikTok. Give us like, follow, comment, all that fun stuff. It really helps the algorithm if you're listening on Spotify, and hopefully getting this up on most RSS feed stuff soon. Give us like a review, like rate us on Spotify. It helps us be discoverable. Also, before I let you plug your stuff, Fresh and Buds is my other podcast. You could see it right up there. That's like a sign I made. But it's a podcast about a card game, an indie card game called Flesh and Blood, which is it's from a indie developer out of New Zealand called Legend Story Studios. It is an excellent trading card game if you like trading card games. It's mostly in person. It's not really like much of a digital game, although there's some fan-made clients. But I bring in guests from all over the community over there and talk to them every week. And it's a great game. And there's just a new set that came out called Bright Lights, which is very beginner friendly. If you see it at your local game store or your comic book store, give it a look and maybe go check out the other podcasts. But that's all from me.
All right. Sounds good. And mention Tommy Fresh at the checkout counter and you get 10% off your Flesh and Blood box. But awesome. Yeah. If you guys want to follow me outside of the podcast, I'm at Matty Gorm, Gorm. So not Matty Juice, but at Matty Gorm on Twitter and Instagram, YouTube, all that sort of stuff. So feel free to follow me over there. I do stream occasionally on Twitch, so feel free to follow me at twitch.tv/Matty Gorm. Always playing a bunch of different games, and who knows, maybe I'll be playing something that we're going to be reviewing at some point on the Fresh Juice podcast. But that is everything from me. And Tom, I had a great time. I
think this is going to be one hell of a journey, my friend. Now, everybody stay fresh and stay juiced. I don't know. Goodbye.